I am Zach Broom. I'm the pastor at Eagles Nest Church in Breezy Point, Minnesota, and I am here to show you my sermon prep process. This is mostly for the people at my church. I'm putting this together. We have a ministry that we do where we have guys in the church occasionally preach for a Sunday night service, and then afterwards we meet to give them feedback, positives, and areas of correction or areas they could improve in. So I figured I would show my process, not because I have this figured out by any stretch of the imagination. I've been a senior pastor now for about 3 years. Before that, I was a youth pastor for about 2.5. Did some preaching about once a month then. And this is the process I'm currently doing. It's by no stretch of the imagination to say that it won't change. It won't be tweaked. It should change. It should grow and develop, hopefully over the next 30 years or whatever it is I end up, Lord willing, being able to do ministry. So I'm putting this process together if it's helpful for people to kind of get just a baseline of what they might consider doing, or even if there's just elements that they might want to incorporate. So let's jump in. All right. So this Sunday, my text is Matthew 22, 15 through 22. I've been in the book of Matthew for, about, I think, 2 years. It'll be a 3-year study, 3.5-year study, I think, total by the time we finish it. So we just take sections. The next section is all about the Pharisees coming to Jesus and asking him about whether or not it's right to pay taxes to Caesar. So the first thing I do, I use Bible Gateway, even though I have the text in Logos, is I take the text for this coming Sunday, and I use a couple programs, obviously. Logos is the main one I do my Bible study in. I have books behind me. I'm not going to show you what I do with those because most of my work now is done out of Logos Bible software. It's definitely worth investing in. You have your entire library with you at all times, which is nice. So invest in Logos. It's worth it, and you will thank yourself. Another program I use here is called Scrivener. This program is remarkable. I think it's about $50. It works on Mac, it works on iPad, it works on Windows, and you can sync them all together through Dropbox. So this is last week's text, Matthew 22, 1 through 14, and this shows kind of what my completed notes were going into the manuscript process. So I do manuscript. I know not everybody does. Some people do an outline. Some people do kind of a hybrid between an outline and a manuscript. And someday when I grow up, I hope to maybe kind of have that hybrid. But for right now, this is what works for me. I manuscript pretty heavily, and I can show you what my manuscript looks like. I'll show that at the end. But to start, this is kind of what I do. So first off, I'll take the verses and put them in here. This doesn't have my outline that I normally do, or my the way I dissect the passage, which I usually do first. I'll show you that process in a second. But I divide this into 2 sections. I have, so if you see here, New Testament, Old Testament, first off sermons by book, and then it breaks down into each chapter. So last week was Matthew 22, 1 through 14. I have commentary section and notes section. Expand those out, and you'll see I do verses, illustrations. Usually I have an application one in there. I had a little bit of an issue last week, so it got deleted. So here's how it's normally divided out. And as I sermon prep, I basically take categories. Okay, these folders aren't here until the very end. Those are my 3 points that I end up coming up with. That's what I do last, kind of with my outline. Once I'm done studying, I come out with my outline. So anything related to different parts of the passage. So in Matthew 22, 1 through 14, when Jesus is talking about the burnt city, I put different categories in here that I think are relevant to it, things that I want to think about, ways I want to group them. Rebellion, I think I got some Psalm 2 in here, as a reference, which I ended up using, which has to do with rebellion against Christ. Lots of different categories, and then when I'm done, I come up with an outline, and then I take each one of these, and it goes within the category, within the outline point. And then what this does for me, I like this because then I can see like a visual of kind of how it all comes together. And so my outline last week, let's see, here we go. Here's my outline. To accept the invitation of the kingdom's wedding feast, we must know the greatness of the king's feast. Point 1 up here. And again, there were more notes. I had an issue where I accidentally didn't sync properly and lost some. And then point 2, the greatness of the king's fury, which has all to do with the wrath that you see the king doing and how that relates to the wrath of God, which is coming for all unbelievers. And then the greatness of the king's forgiveness was the third point, and everything went inside of that. And then sometimes I will put subcategory folders in there of things that relate. So that's kind of what it looks like at the end when I go to do the manuscript process. So basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through kind of how I go through applications, what things go in here, and why. And hopefully that might help you and be a blessing. And if not, well, at least maybe this helps myself think through what I'm doing and why a little bit more. So, okay, let's get to our passage. Matthew 22. And we are 15 through 22. So 15 through 22 is the next section. New folder. Commentary goes in there. New folder, notes goes in there. And verses. Okay, so one of the first things I recommend doing, what I like to do, is try to read the passage in several translations. I think that's helpful to kind of see how things were translated and why. But once you've done that, once you kind of familiarize yourself with the text, and especially what I want to do is I want to read the text early on in the week, so it's fresh in my mind, so I'm thinking about it, so it's not, so I'm not stepping into it completely fresh later on in the week, which makes everything take twice as long. So, all right, so Matthew 22, 15 through 22. I'll just read it. Then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in his words. And they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. Tell us then what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? But Jesus, aware of their malice, said, Why do you put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax. And they brought him a denarius, and Jesus said to them, Whose likeness and inscription is this? They said, Caesar's. Then he said to them, Therefore render to Caesar the things that are Caesar, and to God the things that are God. And when they heard this, they marveled, and they left him and went away. All right, so this isn't technically arcing. It's close. I didn't learn about arcing until after I had this kind of system in place. So I'll show you what I do. So basically, I try to break it up by thought. So then the Pharisees went and plotted how to entangle him in the words. Okay, that's the first kind of main thought. And then their disciples, they sent their disciples to him along with the Herodians, saying, Teacher, we know you are true and teach the way of God truthfully. Okay, there's a thought. Second thought, and you do not care about anyone's opinion, for you are not swayed by appearances. So to me, that's kind of a main thought already. This is kind of a weird thing that it does, where it tabs in kind of goofy, but whatever. Tell us what you think. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? All right, so this first part I'm grouping because they're coming to Jesus with, like, basically flattery that's not genuine. At least that's what I think. And we'll find out after studying. So here's their proposition. Tell us then, what do you think? Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? All right. But Jesus, aware of their malice, hey, we're right, it isn't genuine, said, why do you put me to the test, you hypocrites? Show me the coin for the tax. And they brought him the denarius. And Jesus said to them, whose likeness and inscription is this? And they said, Caesar's. Then Jesus said to them, therefore, render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God's. And when they heard it, they marveled, and they left them. Okay, so people who arc are going to do a much better job of this, so look into arcing. But basically what this helps me do is kind of break down the passage and get a slight visual of what's going on in it before I then jump into the text. Now, one of the things you can do if you have time and throughout the week as things come to your mind is that's where, as you think about this passage, you can think of applications, write them in here, like just bullet points, nothing too fancy. Don't write it out like you would use it. Just give, like one of the things that comes to mind, for example, is being made in the image of God. So application, I would put bullet point, the imago Dei, I think that's how that's spelt, image of God. And then you can just keep throwing in applications there as they relate. So the imago Dei, image of God. What do we owe God? Being made in his image. Because you will forget things, and Sunday evening comes, and you'll be annoyed if you don't write these down as you go. So what I do throughout the week on my phone is I'll, pull up a note, write down thoughts in it. Basically, as the week progresses, I'll think of illustrations, because as I'll get to, I move this coat. As the week progresses, I'll think of different things. I'll put it in there. And I was going to say, as I'll show you, I always begin every sermon with an illustration that captures the main idea of the text. So my goal with that is, if people hear the illustration, if they hear the reading of the text and have a basic understanding of it, they know the thesis like that, and they could suddenly leave the service, not hear anything else, and they would at least walk away with the big idea of the text. And the reason that I do that is I heard another preacher do it, and several other preachers, and it really helps me focus on the text and kind of know where to cling everything onto, because illustrations are pictures to the truth. So I start up front with an illustration, which gives them a picture of the truth that I want them to understand, or at least that I think the text is trying to get us to understand, and then kind of cling all of the textual truths from the passage onto that. All right, let's jump in to Matthew in the commentaries. And again, the aspects of prayer, I'm not going to demonstrate that in this video or dive into that too deeply. This is mostly just trying to show the study methods that I use for the passage. So let's get some music going. So with Logos, I have my commentaries over here that I have bookmarked, and I basically just go through them and pull out, highlight things that I find are relevant, things that are useful, and that's largely what I start with. We just read that. That's the text. Don't need that right now. I'm a slow reader, so. Okay, so that's, to me, that's helpful. Here's why I'm highlighting it and selecting it, is because they're trying to paint Jesus into being somebody that Rome needs to step in and deal with as an upriser. And they're trying to act innocent, as this points out. A lot of the things that I highlight and put in there are things that I didn't know about the text. I'll put a lot more information in there if this is stuff I didn't know. But if it's stuff I already know somewhat about, I'll maybe have like a category for it or a subject for it with a little bit less in there. All right, so here's our cross-reference to Luke. All right, and I always do this when there's cross-references in the other Gospels. Look into a bit later, because sometimes they have elements of the text that one of the Gospel writers don't, that is relevant, that I want to hit on. Unlink that. You can have those linked, but I find it causes me more problems than it helps. You can just hit back to get back to your text, too. Let's make sure this is working. Yes, it is. Well, that I already knew, but it's a good summary, so we'll grab it. All right, see, I'm going to break this down actually a little bit more. There's Jesus using a visual aid to make the truth abundantly clear, which is one of the reasons I'm a big fan of illustrations to start a sermon. Because we are visual learners, even those of us who claim not to be. We are. We're storytelling creatures. We learn through stories, we learn through illustrations, which is why I think Jesus used them a lot. All right, that's interesting. That is very interesting. So they are hypocrites. Even more so. That's really nice, especially if you're not a Greek scholar. I took Greek, but just enough to read it basically and understand some of how Greek works. So you can just click on a word, and there's some pretty interesting things you can find out sometimes about it. So another nice advantage of Logos. And that's worth doing, right? Like, don't go for... word studies are often very dangerous for people because context is king. Don't take a word and be like, oh, it means this over here in this gospel, so therefore it has to mean this here. Don't do that. That's silly. But sometimes it does, and it's helpful to see what the word means and how it's been used. See, like right here, we got hypocrite. Context of this word has to do with like play acting. So I don't know, but I'm guessing I will probably end up touching on that in the actual sermon this coming Sunday. Pretender. So if you see, you can't see as much now because I highlighted it, but underline like that, that means a lot of other people thought that was worth highlighting. So that's why it's got the underline on it. Everyone's favorite passage, not everyone's, half of the people's favorite passage to go to during 2020. Good passage. But it gets more complicated. Weighing that with the other truths. Not going to go there anyways. Good text, though. It's like, all right, I'll say this. It's like everyone either took one of two sides, where it's like, you do this and this is all you ever do, or you don't do this at all. It's almost like there's a middle way. Or we need wisdom in applying these things. That was all free, though, and has nothing to do with this video. But I'm giving you my thoughts and how I process things, so take it or leave it. Pretty relevant, huh? Pretty relevant reason to obey the governing authorities even when we don't feel like it. What was that actually? There we go. Can't remember how to spell Caesar. That's not right, is it? We got too far away. Yeah, I knew there was an A in there. Kind of. I would have put an A if I really knew there was an A. It's a little bit too big. As we were just saying. Wisdom is necessary. If any of you lack wisdom, pray and ask God for it, James says. Should be a regular prayer of all pastors, all people, all Christians, but especially pastors. This is largely going to probably get moved around at some point later. Maybe not, but I can already tell it's going to need some reshuffling. I love Jesus' interactions with the Pharisees and the religious leaders. It is hilarious. Look at that. This is where it ends up. And no one was able to answer him a word. This is my favorite part. Nor from that day did anyone dare to ask him any more questions. Anyways, back to our text. I'm curious if I spelt this right. Now I'm second guessing all my spelling. Yes. I've heard that before. The Herodians were pro-Roman. We'll find out. Another thing I didn't mention is I will listen to several different pastors preach on this passage to see what they've done. And some guys will say not to touch the commentaries or listen to pastors' sermons until later because it's going to taint your own message and you'll end up mimicking them. I haven't found that to be the case. I feel like if I'm going to mimic anybody, it's going to be whoever I listen to last. So for my schedule and just what works best is coming out of Sunday, the last thing I feel like doing, because I'm usually pretty tired, is sitting down and doing this. So I'll listen to different sermons and stuff while driving, while at the gym, things like that. And that works best for me. So mowing the yard, all that kind of stuff, shoveling in winter in Minnesota. It's a good point. Jesus had no time for the unbiblical traditions of man. See, back to poll tax. Got my category there, goes in there. That was an interesting passage. See, a lot of people take that and they make that about paying your taxes, but in short, it more has to do with Jesus paying the temple tax. He doesn't need to pay the temple tax. He's the Son of God. That's the point that's being made there, which is a little different than the point being made here. Context is king. May touch on that. Probably won't have time. That's the fun part about sermon prepping is when you go to write the sermon and preach it, you have all this information and you get to bring like that much of it into the pulpit. So you have to really pick what is important. It's all important, but what is most important? And it's like picking which limb you want to keep or which limbs you want to chop off, which isn't fun. But it's important. It's important to figure out, like, how do I take your 10 to 20 hours of sermon prep and simplify that into 40 minutes or whatever time you have to preach. For me, I can take anywhere from 30 to 50. So my church is pretty flexible, which is nice. But if you come in there with just tons and tons of information, you might preach for 30 minutes and you'll lose people. If you're just shotgunning them with commentary facts that you thought were cool, don't do that. This is more background info. I always have a background info section usually where I throw in previous related things that I might want to touch on, but more than often don't. Some gets in there, but yeah. There's the acting thing we just looked up on Hypocrite before. ooh, I like how that's phrased. They are acting a part, concealing their true motives under a cloak of respectful religious inquiry. Do we ever do that? No. Never. Never, never, never. Now I'm curious. All right. Now we're going down to application. How are we... Well, it doesn't have to be as Christians even. Might have some non-believers who do this need to consider it. How are we modern day? That's not right. There we go. Nailed it. That's going to require some thinking because nothing right now is coming. I mean, some stuff's coming to mind, but that's going to require some thought. What? No, Grammarly. There's no comma there. I'm going to try to quit highlighting like that. Let's try to stop doing that because if you're trying to read that, I'm sure that's bugging you. But it's a habit. There's a passage that's not controversial at all. Mike Winger just came out with I think like a 6-hour video discussing that passage that I haven't got to listen to yet, but I am looking forward to it. I had to write a paper on that passage in seminary, and I remember what I concluded, but I don't remember why. So I'm overdue to restudy it and look at it again. Where's my image of God? Where is it at? Okay. This is the problem. You get too many and they're not organized enough, and then you can't find them. All right, slow down. Bum, bum, bum. Maybe I don't have one. But I did. Oh, I know I did. Remember, I typed Imago Dei. Did I type it down here? Oh, that's why. It's in applications. So we do need a listening for that. Okay, so here's what I usually do when I'm pulling in lots of passages that I know are probably not going to be, likely won't be used. You get the listing there. Actually, I usually do it like this. Imago Dei verses. And it's easier to find because otherwise you get all your notes in here and it's spread out in there and then it just becomes just a mess of stuff and it's not helpful. I just thought of something. Let me look this up. But I believe it's Jonathan Edwards has a really good article on the Imago Dei that might be worth relooking at. And how Christ is the image of God, and how that works. Basically what he says is, his theory of understanding the Trinity is that if you had a perfect perception of yourself, so much so that it would essentially become another person. That's his understanding of Christ and the Trinity. Don't know if it's right, but it's an interesting way to think about it. To think about something we can't understand. But anyways, that article might be worth looking at. Probably not going to make it into the sermon, but I've been meaning to reread it anyways, so or look at it again, I should say. I don't remember if I read all of it. I'm sure someone will have all sorts of helpful Logos tips that I don't know that would make what I'm doing less cumbersome. I need to take the... Logos has a class of like a bunch of videos you can watch, and it shows you how to do lots of cool stuff. I've looked at some of them, but I probably just need to take like a day or two and watch them all. What's it doing now? Claiming to be wise, they became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. That's worth saving in terms of relevance. Here's why. Here's some application. How do we render to Caesar? There's an A, remember? 2 A's. How do we render to Caesar that which belongs to God? And we're going to put Romans 1:23 right next to it. Where'd it go? And in parentheses, idolatry. Because yes, we're supposed to render to Caesar that which is due to Caesar out of our reverence for God. But the temptation is to make Caesar God for many. That relates. How about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego? I don't know if I spelled that right. Yeah, I used their Babylonian names. That's what I memorized as a kid. I think I might just got my opening illustration. A lot of times you can use biblical illustrations. And it's good. The Old Testament is really helpful for that. The danger is it's too familiar. And so if you use a passage that is commonly used in preaching to make the same point over and over and over, people are going to zone out. Not everybody, but it makes it easier too, because you're not seeing it in a new light typically. What did I just highlight? No. That's what I was going to do. Okay, so illustrations. Because that's exactly what they were tempted to do, was to render to Caesar that which was God's, which was worship. sure I would suspect it ends up in the sermon, at least at some point. It may work for the opening illustration because it's a story. And if you tell it in a way that, because you can do that too. You can take a story like that in illustration, you can tell it in a way that maybe they don't realize who you're talking about at first. And then as you keep going, you get maybe halfway through the story like, I know who he's talking about. But it might work. 9 times out of 10, when I come up with early illustrations like this, it doesn't end up being the illustration I use, at least the primary launching illustration into the text. Because what happens is when I get done with all the study, then I make my outline, then I know what the thesis is. Like, and sometimes you can hit the thesis of the passage from a couple different angles. And there are times where I'll sit there and I can't come up with an illustration. And it doesn't happen very often, but I'll take hours sometimes. Just sitting and trying to come up with them. And then especially when it's manuscript writing time and I don't have one, that's where it's really frustrating. And the reason I force myself to have an illustration is not only so it better communicates the text to people, but what I found is it helps me see the text from a perspective I hadn't considered yet. So if I can't find an illustration that I'm really excited about that I think captures the main point, I'll sit there and think about the text, think about the thesis, rewrite the thesis in different ways. And then sometimes that does allow me to see it from a perspective I hadn't considered yet. So I think it's helpful. For me, it's helpful, not only for the congregation. So all right, 21b. So Jesus said to them, "Whose likeness and inscription is this?" They said, "Caesar's." And then he said to them, "Therefore render the things that are Caesar. Render to Caesar the things that are Caesar's, and to God the things that are God." And they heard this, they marveled, and they went away, left him one way. What is the "so" it's talking about here? "So" indicates that Jesus' pronouncement is a direct inference from what has been said about the coin. Is that the "therefore"? What am I missing here? Oh, yeah, that's what it is. It's the "so." Okay, "therefore" is the "so." And I bet if I go in here, yep, oopsies. NIV goes with "so." What does an ASV do? I doubt it goes with "so." There's my New Living. I like the New Living. I think it's a helpful translation, and sometimes it gets it right over the other ones. So I don't preach from it, but it is a helpful. If I can find it, there it is. "Well then," he said. Very modern day English. All right, so it's the "therefore." Therefore, whenever you see a "therefore," you need to ask yourself, what is it there for? I'm sure you've heard that before. That's some good application. And here's why I think. And sometimes I put it in 2 spots, especially if it's application like that. Let's put a "therefore" in there, or a "so." No, we'll do "therefore." Or we'll put in a "well then." Maybe not. God gave us the breath of life. Well then, we owe it. No, that doesn't work. We'll go with "therefore." Okay. Matthew 5. I remember you, Matthew 5. I really enjoyed preaching through the Sermon on the Mount. That was good. Good passage. Okay. Here's what we're going to do with this. Because if we don't give God what is owed, and none of us do, he will give us our just deserts. And the proof text for that, or the helpful text for that, I should say, is Matthew 5. Some people act like too much commentary work is cheating. That's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It helps you study the Bible. Okay? If you just take a sermon, download a sermon, or you just take a commentary and just basically go through it and just preach what's in there, that's plagiarism. You're not digging into the text deeply. But if you use commentaries in this way, where it gives you kind of a path to doing further study, why wouldn't you want to do that? Why wouldn't you want to do that? It's so very helpful. My dad's generation didn't have all this stuff like we do. And the previous generation didn't either. So what's our excuse? Which is sad, especially with the famine in the land that is so common in so many pulpits. Lazy, unprepared messages without an understanding of the actual text and why it's so vitally important. I'm not going to rant on that. Back to work. Okay, 33. Here's why I'm taking this. Eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, but I say to you, do not resist the one who is evil. But if anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. And if anyone would sue you and take your tunic, let him have your cloak as well. You're not rendering to people what they deserve, is the point. Why? Because God doesn't render to us what we deserve. Is there application there? I think so. I don't know if that'll make it, but it's worth writing down. All right, I should say I don't know if that'll be the focus, but it's worth at least putting down. Don't render to others what they deserve as God did not render to us what we deserve. And obviously that's through the cross. Christ was rendered what we deserved, which was wrath. You select it, then it gives you the verses right there, so that's why I do that. It's faster for me. Okay, so this is when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right is doing. Yeah, let's back up. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. Thus, when you give to the needy, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Sorry, it cut out there. You can only record for, I think, like 40 minutes on the iPad app I'm using, iMovies. Should have found something that let me record indefinitely, so it wouldn't cut out. All right, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Oh, I hope I didn't forget what my application of that was going to be. That relates quite a bit. The point here is, here's the application. How do I want to phrase this? Basically, we can take our rendering that we do to God, religious activity, and the motive can be actually to render it to man, which is hypocrisy and doesn't count. So, how do I want to phrase this? think of a better way to say that later. But this is enough for me to remember it. Hypocrisy. There we go. And that needs to also go in the application because I may lose it in there or forget about it when I want it. No, we'll go up. What is this thing doing? What are you doing, Logos? There we go. Okay. Okay, basic idea I'm going to grab. Get too much of this and you can't use it all. But may touch on it without, reading the whole text, but because the congregation was here for these, most of them, unless they're newer or just didn't come that day. So they may remember, should remember. Okay, where am I at? It's almost like the whole Bible has one author behind it. This is God rendering to us not what we deserve. That's not what that's called. What is it? There's a better name for that. I can't remember it right now. That's mercy. No, it is grace. Grace is giving us what we don't deserve. Mercy is not giving us what we do deserve. Grace of God giving us what we don't. All right, I've got a meeting, so we're going to take a break. And I will continue on here tomorrow. How much we got left? Oh, we're almost done. Almost done with this. This is a more technical commentary, so it takes longer to get through. Okay. There is commentary 1 done. 1 down. Like 12 to go. Some of them are way shorter. Like this is a longer one. It's a little bit more we dig into. There's going to be things that get repeated in other ones, so we won't dig into them as deeply. So there we go. All right. Day 2. Shall we do another commentary? I think we'll do one more, and then I won't record the rest of these. So make sure I have this working. Yes. All right. So as I said before, over here I have all of my different commentaries I typically go to. One other thing that I won't show you is right here in Proclaim, you have a lot of times different sermons will pop up in here. So John Piper has one on this. I'll probably end up reading, I'm sure. I have Tim Keller's sermon library. I read that pretty much every time there's a sermon from Tim Keller. I'll listen to John MacArthur, Alistair Begg, different guys like that, kind of just see what they did with the text. And another thing is if you go in here and you don't see anyone on that passage, well, look up Mark's account of the same passage, and then you'll find a lot of times John Piper, Tim Keller, somebody like that has preached on that passage in there, and you can listen to it, which is helpful too. So I won't go through that for this recording, but that's one of the things that's worth considering as well. Make sure you look through these. There are some helpful things sometimes. I'll look at the, I pick the songs for worship too as a worship leader. So where is this at? Music. Sometimes there's songs in there. Usually it shows older hymns, and we do a blend, so it's helpful to see sometimes when there's songs that relate to the passage as well. Let's go to Osborne's commentary. Zondervan Exegetical Commentary set. I really like it. It's shorter, sometimes a little more application, which is helpful. So it's definitely a good one to look at. So I don't always get through every single one of these, especially once I get down to here. I kind of have them in order of the ones I really want to get to. But another thing you can do is if you do run out of time, I mean, obviously sitting down like I'm doing here and going through them is the best, but if you run out, you can, like, say you're going to pull up Constable. I like Constable. He's good too. But the technical ones aren't as good to do text-to-speech. But some of them, like NIV application commentary, especially because it covers a larger section of the text. A lot of times it groups them together because it has like exegesis, application, and things like that. So I'll just select it all like this and go through it, through the passage that I'm on and want to cover. See, it has bridging the context, and you can select it all. Pretend I did, and you can hit copy. And then you go to Microsoft Word, which takes forever to open sometimes. Open. And you can paste it in there, save it. And then on your phone, if you have it synced up through OneDrive, if you have an iPhone, you can do this. And Android, I'm sure, has equivalents too. Actually, I bet the Android one does it too. I haven't had Android for a while, been an iPhone for several years now. But you can do text-to-speech. So
the son of David, Pharisees 22:41-46. In Matthew's narrative of the Holy Week controversies, the first 3 encounters with the religious leaders were initiated as they...
There's different voices you can do. I actually really like the one on the iPhone that reads it back better. So when you're out and about, you can listen to it as well if you run out of time that week and want to get through a few more of them, just to kind of pick up different things. So again, with the more technical commentaries, that's not as helpful, but it's an option. So, all right. Let's go through one more of these, and then I will skip ahead later once I've gotten through all these myself and kind of show you what the finished product looks like in here and then how I organize. So let's jump in. All right. That's not right. That's not our passage. So, here we go. So we want... It goes right to it. Oh, that's why. I did it wrong. There we go. All right, now we're set. Methinks this author, and it is amillennial. But here's the thing with amillennial. If you're not amillennial in your eschatology, which I'm not, I'm premillennial, there's still a lot you can glean in terms of application because there are spiritual realities that even premillennial guys recognize, that premillennial people recognize in terms of being kingdom citizens. Because as a premillennialist, I believe we are not in the kingdom. It's literally coming, but we are citizens of the kingdom who are ambassadors inviting people to spiritually become citizens of it so that they can enter the kingdom. As Jesus told Nicodemus, you must be born again. So we are ambassadors inviting people to do just that, become spiritual citizens so they can enter. So the application, even though a lot of times I'll disagree with their exegesis of the passage in terms of mill versus pre-mill or even post-mill sometimes, the application is still very helpful. Okay. Main idea. And again, here there's going to be lots of overlap, so we looked at those two at least. I don't know if we looked at 2 Timothy. So I won't look at them again because I already did. and I've got them in here. So as you see, like the more commentaries you go through, the faster it just naturally gets because you're going to have a lot of repeat. But there's going to also be things that other commentators didn't emphasize or touch upon that are helpful. So I'm just going to grab those verses. They're more relevant. As we're supposed to be praying for our leaders, because we are to render to them prayer. So I'm going to make that its own category. And so that's why I think that relates, because that's what we are called to render. Paul's saying in 1 Timothy 2. And if we're not praying for our government leaders, we are not listening to Jesus' commands to render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's. So good application there, and I'll also put that down here. Where did it go? Where'd the bullet points go? I'm blind. Why am I not seeing this? Is it gone? It looks like it's gone. Huh. That's weird. Found one that has a bullet point. There we go. Let's see if it shows up here. If it's loud, there's a class going on out there in the lobby, so if you hear that, that's why today. Let's try this. Okay, whatever. I don't know why the bullet points are gone. I mean, maybe they're here. I'm just not seeing them. But they look gone. That's funny. This is wasting time. Customize toolbar. Maybe I'll edit this out later. I've never had this happen. But it's weird. Let's just close it and reopen it. Was that there the whole time? Or did it bug out and it was missing? I'll bet it. I'll bet it was there. And I'm just blind. Okay. Yeah, this is going to be helpful. I already have a category for that. So, Acts 4:19. Back up. We'll start in 18, not 19, which is what's there. Back up one, oops. So they called them and charged them not to speak or teach at all in the name of Jesus. But Peter and John answered them, whether it is right in the sight of God to listen to you rather than God, you must judge, for we cannot but speak of what we have seen and heard. We'll stop there. Hey, he's quoting Psalm 2. One of my favorite Psalms. There's the classic, we must obey God rather than men verse. We'll grab all of it. Here's a nice little breakdown. Hey, look, it's that kind of arcing thing, but a little bit different. Sort of. Diagramming, you could call it. See, we know you are true, and we know you are true, and we know you teach the way of God in keeping with the truth. That's kind of what we did earlier when we started all this. It's a cool way to do it. Conclusion. Mark's count, I don't think we got that yet. I think we just got Luke's. Yep. Now, if you really want to be like super study man, super study pastor, I've never done this and I don't think I ever will. There's not enough time. You could go through like we're doing here, there's the mouse pointer, for these cross-reference passages and read some commentaries on it too, if you really wanted to. But I don't do that because ain't nobody got time for that. There's other things you have to do throughout the week for ministry, beyond studying. Unless you're just a preaching pastor and you got people who do all that stuff, which is a whole other conversation. So, it's good to kind of know what the other gospel writers do with their telling of the event. Sorry, I'm doing the highlighting thing. I'll quit doing that. Did we have anything on false flattery? Yeah. The reason I'm highlighting that is because when I first was reading the text, the reason I'm putting that in there is because when I first looked at the text, that's not stuff that really stood out to me. So I'm not putting it in there because I need to reference that. It's just, it helps me remember or focus on it more, and then maybe it'll come to mind as I'm writing the manuscript later. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, because because the Herodians and the Pharisees did not get along. Well, he's undermining what I just said a little bit. A little bit, not fully. It's going to go in the taxes section. So this is about Jesus knowing their evil thoughts, which shows his divinity, obviously. So the omniscience of God, Jesus' omniscience. And commentators sometimes speculate on, did Jesus just perceive this, or was this divine knowledge that he had? So there's some debate there, but Jesus is God, so he obviously knew things at times because of his divinity. That one seems more like a perception thing. Maybe not, but I'm going to leave it out. We're going to take that. It's going in there. I hadn't thought of that. Connections between unbelieving Israel in the Exodus and unbelieving Israel at the first Advent. That's interesting. We're taking all of it. Gonna take it all. What's the context here? So they forgot the God who gave them birth. The Lord saw it and spurned them because of the provocation of his sons and daughters. He said, I will hide my face from them. See what their end will be, for they are a perverse generation, children in whom there is no faithfulness. So Moses came and recited all these words of this song in the hearing of the people, he and Joshua the son of Nun. And when Moses had finished speaking all these words to Israel, he said to them, Take to heart all the words which I am warning you today, that you may command them to your children, that they may be careful to do all the words of this law. For it is no empty word for you, but your very life. And by this word you shall live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to possess. So this first covenant song of judgment and blessing and all that is seems like it relates to this generation in Jesus' day, so I'm sure that's going to come up in other commentaries, so I'm going to leave that for now because I don't know a lot about Deuteronomy 32. I need to study it. But we'll see what comes up in the rest of these commentaries over here on it. So let's keep going. Possible. How about super likely? Regardless, it applies. The absence of a secular sacred dichotomy in the ancient world means that Caesar's realm is actually part of God's realm. I need to think about that more. There's an idea, I mean, this relates to Apologetics, Stephen Jay Gould's overlapping magisterium. Like, basically the idea that religion speaks to the spiritual and science speaks to the physical, and they shouldn't overlap each other, which is nonsense. The Bible has lots of claims about the natural world. So that makes me think of that. Not sure how that would relate. So All right, application. A lot of commentaries will have sections like this, which are extremely helpful. Is that for us, or is that for their only for the early disciples? I think the latter. In part, at least. I want to phrase this. I like how that's phrased. Where was that? There it is. Put it in there. All right, that is commentary number 2. So I'm going to stop there, and I will continue off in a blink of your eye, not mine, through the rest of these when that's all done, and then I'll organize. So, all right, commentaries are finished, and I have my outline done. This is the outline I have. Sometimes this changes, but what I typically try to do is have my outline follow the text, because that's what it means to preach exegetical sermons. So the first point, so the thesis of this text, it's pay what you owe to the kings of the world, the king of the world, the king who saved the world. Those are my 3 points. So how do I get these points from this text? Well, obviously render to Caesar, right there. Things that are Caesar's, point 1, and to the thing, and render to God the things that are God's, point 2. Now this third one, and they say, where's that in the text? Well, it's more of an implied gospel point, I would say, than a textual point. But where I'm getting that largely from is what I think I'll focus on is this marvel here. And when they heard it, they marveled, and they went and they left him and went away. Well, the king who saved the world by becoming a public spectacle, a public marvel. So kind of a play on words there a little bit. Probably point to Isaiah 53 here. He had no form or majesty that we should look at him, no beauty that we should desire him. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrow and acquainted with grief. As one from whom men hid their faces, he was despised, and we esteemed him not. He basically was crushed for us. By his wounds we are healed. That's what was necessary to make us kingdom citizens. So that's kind of the direction I'm going to go here, I think. What it's looking like. What else was I going to say? Oh, okay. So I have my points in here, and now what I do is I basically organize them. Whichever ones relate to each point goes in that folder. And then I'll try to put them in order within that folder a little bit too, so that when I'm writing, like I don't go through and read all this stuff. It's more like it jogs my memory. Sometimes if it's like, oh, what are the verses here again? I'll pull it up and I have it right there ready to go. If I want to touch on like render, I have some things I pulled up from some commentaries here that are helpful. So different things like that. So organization time. Either put it like before your first point. I usually do this. I usually put it before my first point, or often more times than not within my first point. So if it's like, yeah, I'll probably just leave it there. This is a nice little, you can split it like this. Nice little feature. The more I think about this, So here's false marveling going on up here. Teacher, we know that you are true and teach the way of God truthfully, and you do not care about anyone's opinions, for you're not swayed by appearances. Trying to bait him to say, or to show that, hey, I'm not swayed by people's opinions, because they're putting him between a rock and a hard place, making him pick. So they falsely marvel at him here, but then they do some marveling here. We'll see what happens with that. Color coding is helpful too, which I do in the manuscript, which I'll show you in a minute. I did come up with my illustration too, almost for sure. Sometimes it switches, but I'm basically going to use my opening illustration having to do with like something with like tax evasion or not paying your rent or bankruptcy, something like that. And then I can pull that back into connecting with what we owe the king of the world and then the king who saved the world. This is a really interesting point I got from one of the commentaries. I don't remember which one it was, but in Matthew 22 here, Jesus is being examined by the religious leaders. And so the commentators point out that he's the Lamb of God who was publicly examined before Passover. Interesting point. Yeah, it's just, I thought that was well stated. I don't think I'll use it. Where I talked about the Pharisees a lot in Matthew. But every once in a while, another reminder from a different angle is helpful. Sometimes that happens. You end up with two of the same. It's fine, just condense them. So you see what happens is as you keep organizing like this, you kind of find the points and the subpoint. Like within your points, you'll find subpoints and then subpoints within subpoints. It doesn't always go that way when you're writing the manuscript, but at least this helps me find like, or see a visual of the entire text and all the work I've done in the commentaries and stuff afterwards. And interesting enough, when I was writing my book on apologetics, I did this with Microsoft Word with like just tons and tons of Word files within folders. This is a much, much better way to do it. And I really wish I could time travel and go back and give myself Scrivener because it's just such a better way to organize stuff. I got done, I had like, I don't know, hundreds of Word documents. That took weeks to organize itself. Way easier with this. Buy Scrivener. It's worth it. Another thing I do with it, I have sermon illustrations. I just started doing this maybe a couple months ago, but I'm putting sermon illustration ideas in here. Ideally, I'll go back to all my other sermons and put them in here sometime when I have a light week. Let's see when that happens. But, and then I'll find a way to organize these even more down the road, probably. I have teaching sections in here that I put stuff, just notes on things. It's helpful. So, all right, this is close enough. This will get moved around as I'm going, I'm sure. Okay. Back to Logos. So I use Logos as Sermon Manager. It's got some things I wish were better, but overall it's good. I like it. It syncs with the app. So all my sermons are in here from the last 3 years, basically. So here's this one's. This coming Sundays. Empty. Not done yet. You can even, like, you want to put Revelation 1:1 in here? Boom. Puts it right in there for you. Even puts a slide there for you. So that's a nice feature about it. And then that syncs with Proclaim. When you do publish, send to Proclaim, you have to do a little formatting when you're done, but it's it's a big time saver overall. The things I wish they would change is allow you to customize certain templates for like your outlines and things like that. It'd be nice if I could just select the text and it will pre-format to what I want to, because it doesn't, so I have to change it at the end. So here's an example of what the completed manuscript looks like a little bit. So I always have my outline in the manuscript because one of the things one of my previous pastors taught me was to show your outline, repeat your outline, and then repeat it again as you get to the new outline point every time. So I color code stuff a bit just to help it pop out a little more. Sometimes I'll even put like sometimes I do things like this where it tells me, and then like maybe a note about it. I didn't last time, obviously, but this is helpful too. I'm going to try to do this more, actually, because I think it'll help me be more free from my notes, having that, because then I can see what's there. I can describe that. I remember it, like I feel like I could do that without most of these notes. But the notes that are there, if you're having brain fog or whatever, your brain's not clicking, that kind of stuff. So that's what it looks like. As I said, you can put scripture text right into it like that. So that's it. Just one quick thought here as we wrap up. When it comes to putting your manuscript together, as you prepare to preach, try to think of it like you're hunting with a rifle, not a shotgun. Your goal is to take the thesis of the text and drive it straight through the passage so that you hit the bullseye dead center at the end of the sermon. So don't take the shotgun approach where you try to preach everything that needs to be preached in one sermon. There'll be another day for that. At the same time, you will address side issues, obviously, but you should only try to weave those side issues, as they relate to the main thesis and subpoints of your text. So when you address a side point or a cross-reference, you want your listeners to basically think, oh, I see how that relates to the main point of this text. You don't want rabbit trails all over the place. People will not be able to track with you. Even if it's a good point, a good biblical point you're making, save that for another day, I would advise. So no shotguns. Don't preach with a shotgun. Preach with a rifle. You're after one deer, not 50. There's a limit. You only get one. So hunt with a rifle. There'll be another day to address points that aren't related to your text. So preach expositionally by having the main point of the text propel through the sermon like a bullet, and never forget that preaching Christ crucified and the gospel is what lies at the center of the target. And you don't want it as like a cheap tack me on at the end either, right? We've all heard that before, where it's like you're preaching a message and at the very end it's like, all right, now we got to have a quick gospel attachment to it. Don't do that. The whole text needs to have that sniper bullet weaving through it, hitting the gospel in a way that is natural, that culminates in Christ. Now, obviously, you can preach from Christ, you can preach to Christ. It depends largely on the text, but just remember that preaching Christ crucified is what lies at the center of the target of what we're trying to do when we preach. So that would be my advice there. All right, so I will get this done. I will post a link to the sermon for those who are interested in hearing the finished product, along with a link to our church's website. We have all of our sermons on there, all of our services on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, basically every podcast app it's available on. I'll also throw a link to my book on apologetics at the bottom here for anyone who might be interested in that. It's available on Kindle, paperback, hard copy, and Audible format. It's called Without God, Science, Belief, Morality, and the Meaning of Life. So that's it. That gives you a small glimpse here of my sermon prep process. So I hope this was profitable for you. If you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, you know the drill. So time to write the sermon, and hope this was helpful. God bless.